Welcome to Advanblack's YouTube channel. I'm Steve, service technician for Advanblack, and today I'm going to show you a brand new Softail fender that Advanblack has come out with. Now we're going to install it on a Heritage over there, and I want to show you a few differences between the Heritage and say the Softail Deluxe. Now the fender will fit both bikes, but there's a little bit different between the Heritage and say the Deluxe when it comes to the tail light and the license plate frame and the turn signals. Now up here on the table we have the OEM fender off of the Heritage, and you can see the license plate frame above the tail light and then the bullet turn signals. Now this bullet turn signal system here and this tail light are aftermarket. The one that came on the Heritage would have the long dog bone and the round turn signals way out here. And we changed it to the short one so we could add saddlebags to the Softail, which we also sell on Advanblack's website. You can put the hard bags, the hard saddlebags on your Softail Heritage as long as you change to these turn signals a little bit shorter so the bags have room to clear and don't hit them. And next to it here we have our extended Softail rear fender. As you can see, I've got the fronts pretty well lined up, and you can see the difference in the length of the OEM fender and the extended fender that we're selling now. Now this fender will be the same for both models, but what you want to do is look on the website and get the fender that's for your bike. If you have a Heritage, order the Heritage. If you have the Deluxe, order the Deluxe, because the holes in the rear of the fender will be drilled different for both setups. So this one is drilled for the Tombstone tail light that comes, say, like on the Deluxe. You got the Tombstone tail light, which we'll be installing today, and I'll show you how to do that. And you'll have the bullet blinker bar that goes across there. And as you can see, the bullet blinker bar will just simply go here, just like on your OEM fender. And then you've got two holes down here for your wires. And then of course, the three large holes here for your Tombstone tail light, and then a hole up here for your wire as well. Now you got two options when it comes to the wiring. The holes are going to be pretty small for the wiring, so your OEM clips may not fit through the hole. We've left those holes small to let you decide what you want to do with it. If you want to cut your plugs off and poke them through the small hole and hardwire your tail lights, which is what we're going to do today, your second option is going to be to drill out the holes bigger so it fits the plug so you don't have to do any cutting or soldering. Now what we're going to do today is go ahead and leave the holes small. I've already cut the ends off, the Molex connectors that comes on these. I'm going to show you how to install them and hardwire them, because it's easy to drill a hole and plug in a wire. And now I'm going to flip the camera around. I'm going to show you our first prototype, and I'll talk about the differences that we have on that one. Now on the 15 Heritage back here, I'm going to show you the first prototype fender that we actually put on here. Now this fender has been changed. Basically, it's going to be the same fender as that one over there, except we're going to either drill the holes for this tail light and drill 4 holes for the license plate frame, but it will not be Frenched in like this anymore. It's going to be the same fender, but this will just lay flat on the fender, or you can choose the one that's on the table over there, which we're going to take this one off and install today. And you can choose that one that's drilled for the Tombstone and the bullet blinkers. Now with the two style fender versions that we're going to have, if you do order this fender with our fisheye tail ends and our license plate frame at the bottom, the turn signals, these turn signals will come with it. Now when you're using that fisheye style tail lamp, that is a run and brake. These will strictly be used as turn signals. They won't be on with key on. They'll only blink. So you'll see on the end here that you've got 3 wires, a ground, a turn, and a constant. You're only going to hook up the 2 wires, the ground and the turn. You'll have a 2-pin Molex connector, but we left that off because you can't get that Molex connector through the hole. So you're going to want to poke these through and then put your connector on. And a quick note on the installation, this is going to go up against that like that, right? And then you have a nut and a washer. You're going to want to install these on the frame rail in this rear hole back here while this is off of the bike. You can't put this on now. This nut should actually be right on the other side of this frame rail and not on the inside of the fender. It won't reach that far. So while this frame rail is off and you have it on the soft table, go ahead and poke your wires through the hole. On the back side, go ahead and put your split washer and your nut. Tighten that down. Once you have both turn signals installed, you'll flip it over. When you do your wiring part, you'll put the connectors on and go ahead and hook it into the harness that we send with the fender. So on the rear fender, you've got 4 bolts right here that hold the fender to the fender bracket. The actual bracket is held on by these two bolts right here, two on each side, and then you've got a pin up here that releases this plastic piece, and on the other side you've got your wire harness. Look right here, you're going to find this black plug underneath your seat. This is going to be going back to your tail light. You can actually just disconnect that like that. Now, to remove the entire thing from the bike, we're just going to remove these two bolts on both sides, and then we can come back here and slide the whole fender off. I'm just going to loosen this one. Not actually going to take it out. We're going to go to the other side of the bike. We're going to remove that rear one, loosen the front one. You see that fender already starting to drop. I'll take that front one out. I'm going to go ahead and let that fender set on the tire. If you're doing this by yourself, you're just going to want to have this one loose when you start to take the other one out, so it goes ahead and sets on the tire. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this one out, and then we can walk to the back of the bike, and we can simply pull out and lift up on this rear fender and walk it off just like that. Now, like I was saying before, these four bolts right here hold the bracket onto the fender, and you've got metal plates, as you can see down here, that have to come out. So you may want to make note of how these metal plates are placed in there. And once again, if you're doing this by yourself, these frame brackets right here are pretty heavy. So once you get that last screw ready to go, make sure this isn't sliding down, scratching up your paint. You can see that plate that just came out. I'm going to pull that off. We're going to set that one to the side. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this license plate. So because this was a prototype fender, we already had a lot of stuff going on with the wiring. We had aftermarket turn signals and stuff like that, but the general idea of this video is to show you how easy it is to remove the rear fender of your Softail, get it on a soft table, flip it over, get your brackets off of both sides, and then also just look at your wiring harness and see what needs to be unplugged to get the wiring harness, the main harness, out of your fender, because we're going to reuse that main harness in the new fender. So that's just a general idea. So pay really no attention to what I'm doing in the wiring on this one, but it's just basically the same thing. So you're going to have a plug for your turn signals, and you're going to have a plug for your tail light. You just want to get those disconnected and get the main wiring harness out of the fender. I'm going to go ahead and get these other four bolts out. And once you have everything off of the fender that you need, you can move that out of the way. Now, when it comes to the wiring on this fender, a lot of this is going to be up to you on how you want to do it. So you can take your OEM wire harness out of your OEM fender and put it into the new fender. You're going to run your Tombstone tail light and plug that in with the OEM connectors. They're just Molex connectors. You're going to plug that in. The options that you're going to have are when it comes to the turn signal. We have two very small holes drilled in the rear of the fender to allow the wire to pass through for your turn signals. Now that hole can be drilled out to the size of that small Molex connector to push it through, but you're going to have larger holes. So in order to keep those holes smaller, you can cut those Molex connectors off, push the wire through, and you can solder that connector back on if you want to, or you can just hardwire your tail light. The way that we're going to do it today is with splice connectors like this. You put it on both sides of the wire, crimp it down, and we may even put a little heat shrink over it just in case, or you can use these little clamshells that just one side clamshells onto the wire, and then you stick the other wire in it and you squeeze it together with like a pair of channel locks. I don't particularly care for those. They can come loose, they can vibrate loose. So if you are going to use those, make sure that you have both wires completely connected, and then just wrap some kind of tape or heat shrink or something around that to keep that from vibrating open again. The better way is to use a splice connector like these. If I get it up here on camera so you can see it a little better, this is just an 18 to 22 gauge splice connector, and you're just going to crimp both sides of that. That's going to allow our hole to stay smaller. You just want that hole big enough, it's going to come pre-drilled, big enough to run the wire through, but not the OEM connector on the turn signal. So that's going to be basically up to you. So on the back of the fender here, you can see the two small holes that I'm talking about. It's going to allow that wire from your turn signal to just pass through there. These 3 holes right here will be for your Tombstone tail light, and then of course this hole up here will be for the wire for that. And if your connector is larger than that hole, you can go ahead and drill that out too as well, because that's actually going to be behind the Tombstone tail light. Down here at the bottom you have this hole and this hole. That's going to be for your turn signals. So wire hole, 3 holes for your Tombstone, turn signal wire. So it's going to come pre-drilled like this if you want to use your OEM Tombstone and your OEM bullet blinker. So now over here on the bike, we've connected an aftermarket rear fender wire harness like this. And you can use your OEM, but what we're basically going to do here is I'm going to show you how to find what wire goes to what. We've got our meter connected to the battery. Now you can use just a simple test light like this, a cheap, just $9 test light from Harbor Freight will work just the same. With that style light, you're just going to want to ground it, turn the bike on, and then start probing wires. Now we have a little bit better one here, and we're going to go over here. We know this is our right turn signal. We know the black is going to be at ground. We can go ahead and test that by poking that in there to make sure that we have a good ground. We're grounded. The middle one is going to be your constant 12.2 volt. So I've got my blinker on. I'm going to probe the yellow wire. You can verify that by turning the blinker off. Okay, so we know the yellow wire on the right side is our turn signal. We've got the ground, and the blue is our constant. Over here on the left side, we're going to do the same thing. I already know my black is going to be my ground, my blue is going to be my constant, my green is going to be my turn signal. Now if we go to our tail light, we've got 3 wires on this. It's a 4-pin connector, but we've got 3 wires. Our black's our ground. We check to make sure we have ground. We do. 12.3 volts on our constant, and red is going to give us 0.4. That's just the brake on. When I hit the brake, 12.2. That lit up our brake light. So now we know black ground, blue constant, red is going to be our brake lights. So that's how you check. And doing that with a test light, instead of hearing a beep and seeing bolts, you're just going to see that light light up. And on the brake side, when you hit your brake, that brake light's going to light up lighter. Now, since I know that I'm wiring my turn signals through here, I'm not going to drill these holes out any bigger. I'm going to go ahead and poke those through. We're going to go ahead and mount our turn signal. Now with the rear brake light, I want to wire it on this side because I want to hide my connectors up underneath the tail light. So I will have to take my harness, get my brake over here, and remember we already figured out what the wires do. So basically just going to cut this connector off. I'm going to poke it through here, and then I'm going to be able to hide it in the back. So I'm just going to cut the camera now, go ahead and do my wiring, and then we'll cut it back on and we'll have a look at it. So now we have our Tombstone tail light and our turn signals installed, wired. We've got them wired into the harness, and inside this fender along both sides, you're going to see little clips that are in there, and that's where you're going to zip tie your lead wire that goes back up here underneath your seat. Now we're going to install these side rails back onto the fender. Now this is where it can get a little bit tricky if you're doing this by yourself, because these steel plates here are pretty heavy. The trickiest part about this is getting them installed without scratching your paint, because this gets a little awkward to hold, and then once this heavy plate is installed on one side, it makes the fender, you know, kind of tipsy to one side. So if you're doing this part by yourself, please be careful, take your time in doing this. But it's gonna go back together the same way that we took it apart. Once we get these side rails back on, we're gonna walk it back over to the bike and install it with the 4 remaining bolts back there. We do have a license plate frame that should be here today. We had to order one. This, like I said, this started out as a Heritage, which did not come with a Tombstone tail light. So we bought an OEM Tombstone tail light and a turn signal assembly, and then we had to order a curved plate for the back of this. And like I said, should be here today, so we may have it on by the end of the video. But regardless, that plate just bolts on right here. And if you take your Tombstone tail light off, you don't have to take the plate off. You can just transfer that over from your OEM fender over to your new fender. So when we put this metal plate in, the long end of this is going to poke out through this hole up here in the front. So we're going to poke that through. The back end will not hang. We have to hold that up in there to get that one started. So we're going to walk this over with our front bolt in. We're going to stand it up, kind of lean it against the fender. On this plate, you've got a long point and a short point. You're going to flip this around. You're going to want the short point to be up here in the front. So when we walk this through, this is actually going to poke through that hole right there. The back end is going to lay down. We want to go ahead and get this bolt started. Do this by hand so you don't cross thread anything. we get that one started, we're going to take that part in the back, we're going to pull it up till it lines up with the hole here, just like that. Now we can walk this up and get our bolt kind of started in here. We're going to walk this up, line it up. And this is the part where it gets tricky. You got to hold the fender up and get this all lined up and in place. I'm going to go ahead and get this one started. I'm not going to cinch all this stuff down and flip the fender around. Those two bolts will hold everything in place. I'm going to bring our plate over. Get our long plate, once again, short end in the front. And I'm just going to kind of hold this up with my arm. Get this one installed. Get our short bolt ready. Get our long bolt, pull this up into place. Now from here it gets a little bit easier because we got the front ones on, everything's propped up and it's not as wobbly. Now on the rear one you have a plate that looks like this. They're both going to the same side, so two short bolts, and then you got a hole back here. This is where we had our aftermarket turn signals installed before. So we're going to take our short bolts, we're going to put this on the inside. Okay, I'm going to leave it loose. So now that we have our fender completely ready to put back on the bike, I'm going to walk it over here and install it. Remember, the two bolts up here, two bolts on the other side. Now I didn't tighten everything down on the table. You can tighten the rear two bolts, but the front two bolts that actually go into that steel plate, you're going to want to leave those loose until you get this mounted on the bike, because this chrome piece mounts over this metal piece and it just kind of sets in there. So if you tighten everything down and you don't have these holes exactly lined up, it makes it hard to get these bolts in. So if you're doing this by yourself, once again, that's one thing that you don't want to have to fight with. So leave these two bolts loose so this plate actually moves on the steel plate behind it. Now once you have the front four tightened up, go ahead and tighten up your mounting bolts. Now all we have left to do is pull our wire harness up through here, right up there, little plastic tab that goes in this hole right here. We're going to come down and plug it in. Now we've taken the saddlebags off the bike, so it's one other thing to note. These two bolts right here would be for your saddlebag bolts, and these would be your actual fender fasteners. All four of those actually hold this system on. When you put the saddlebag bolts in, it goes into that plate, which also holds the fender. But as far as torque specs goes, these are your fasteners. And all of these call for 21 to 27 foot-pounds. These two fasteners on each side, total of 4, are called your lower fasteners, and these have 2 torque specs. That means you're going to torque them once and then you're going to torque them again. So your first torque spec is going to be 30 to 35 foot-pounds. Second torque spec is going to be 38 to 42 foot-pounds. Now that we have the fender mounted on the bike, there's only one thing left to do, and that's if you want to do it. This fender does come with the holes pre-drilled for the one-up seat. It's going to have the 2 bolt posts right here. You can pull that from your stock fender and put it on. It's just 2 plastic clips. You pull them off, pull it out, put it in here. If you want to run a 2-up seat, or if you ever want to run a 2-up seat, you can do a 2-piece or a 1-piece, but either one of them, to make it 2-up, will require a 3rd hole back here. And we don't drill this hole just in case you do want to run just a 1-up seat. You don't ever plan on putting a 2-up seat on there, so you don't have a hole back here with that you just have to have a seat bolt in. This is your seat bolt system. This is your seat bolt itself. and then you'll have a nut here, and then you'll also have a flat bolt right here with a rubber washer on it. Now I just use a pencil to mark the fender just in case we have to mark it in several different places. The pencil's enough to go ahead and mark it and not damage the paint. But if you use a permanent marker, it may be a little bit harder to get off. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take my single seat, I'm gonna put it into place, I'm gonna push it up. I'm gonna go back here to the back of the bike. I'm gonna try to get dead center on this. I'm pretty good at eyeballing stuff, but if you're not, go ahead and get a tape measure out and measure from your edges. And you wanna pull this down into place. And then we'll mark that with the pencil. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this one out. I'll take my 2-piece seat. I'll go ahead and get it pushed into place. We'll get these bolts in. We'll go ahead and get the nuts on. You want to go ahead and mount it all the way. You'll see these knobs back here. That's where these grooves go in. We're going to slide this into place. And because I have 2 seats, I'm just verifying that both of them equal the same distance when they're mounted. I just want to verify my hole. Now, if you only have 1 seat, just put it on, mark it, and drill it. This bolt with the rubber washer on it is going to slide down in the fender like this with a nut on the bottom. And then you'll see on this side, it's also threaded as well. So that's where your seat bolt will go in. So it's just going to slide down in. So we need our hole to be approximately the size of this bolt. Now to make this go a lot easier for us, we're going to use a punch like this. You can pick these up at Harbor Freight, Amazon, wherever you want to get it. But this punch is spring loaded, so when I push it in, it'll pop the plastic and make a dent. And that will help guide our drill bit in because it is painted plastic. It is a smooth surface, so we don't want that drill bit dancing or skirting away from us when we start to drill that hole. So what I'm going to do is go to the middle of that mark. Now we got a nice little dent there. Now before you start drilling, bear in mind where your tire is. These drill bits aren't very long, but if you have a long drill bit, make sure that when you break through the plastic, it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to drill plastic. So don't be jamming this down in and going into your tire. Just guide the drill bit in slow motion until it breaks through and then stop. So once you have it drilled, you're just going to drop your nut down in there. You can see it, that just drops in there like that with the rubber side, of course, touching the paint. Now, if you have a normal 16-inch wheel and tire on your bike that comes OEM on there, you should be able to get your hand up in there with a box end wrench or a ratchet and go ahead and get that tightened down. You're going to take this larger nut to the inside and tighten it down. Since we have an 18, can't really get my big paws up in there. So instead of taking the entire fender off, all you have to do is loosen the front 2 bolts on this, remove the rear 2 bolts on this, and tilt the fender up. You can use these 2 front bolts here as a pivot point, and that's what we're going to do now. Because unfortunately, you can't make this hole without having the fender mounted to the bike. I'm gonna pull this bolt back out. Just for precautions, we're gonna add some blue Loctite to the end of that. And drop that back in. We'll lift the fender up, get our arm in there. Go ahead and get that started. We're going to put the seat bolt in all the way. That's going to give us something to grab onto while we're tightening this down. Lift this up. Now, let's go ahead and get our fender bolts back in. Now we got our front seat installed. I'm going to slide our passenger pillion on. And come back here to the hole. That's it. Now let's give it a look at. So that's pretty much it. Not too difficult to get put on your bike. The most difficult part about that is deciding what you want to do with the turn signals, and whether you want to hardwire them or drill your holes a little bigger and push your OEM clips through and go ahead and plug them in. Either way, not a difficult process. And remember, you can get this in two different styles, with our curved plate at the bottom and then our fisheye style tail lens at the bottom right above that, or you can get it drilled just like we did today. Now this is a 2015 Heritage, but as you can see, at the end of the day, we converted the whole rear end. We now have a Tombstone tail light, which generally does not come on a Heritage, and we also have the bullet turn signals in place of the big long, like dog bone bar with the big turn signals. So just a complete version on the rear end of that bike. With just a few tools, you can do this at home. If you have any questions on this video, make sure to leave it down below. I'll try to help you the best that I can. I'm gonna get out of here and get myself back to work. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, as always, be safe. Keep your knees in the breeze.